Appreciate y'all again for being here. Welcome to what we're calling Straight to the Point. Calling it Straight to the Point because we wanted to be candid. We're in a barbershop because, barbershops, especially for Black men, have traditionally been a space of having open conversations, just to get an idea of where y'all at, what y'all are feeling, kind of like a pulse check about what's going on in our community, in our state, around the country, and even some international topics as well. My name is Jordan Lopez. I'm a state representative-elect here in North Carolina's House District 112. When I enter office next year, I'll be one of the youngest, actually the youngest Democratic legislator in the state. And with me, I have Councilman Chris Suggs. He is the youngest elected official in the state currently, city council member from Kinston, North Carolina. Pass it off to you if you want to say a few words.
We, created this platform because we realized that there are few of us Black men in politics. And in being in this space, so many people make assumptions about what Black men are thinking. They categorize us all together, they generalize us all. And yeah, there are a lot of experiences we all share, but we also have very unique viewpoints and identities and ways of expressing ourselves. So why not get some Black men together, talk about what's happening in our communities across the state and around the world so that America can see Black men are paying attention, Black men are interested in what's going on, and we have something to say about what's happening in society too. So thank y'all for joining us. Glad to be here in Charlotte with you guys and looking forward to a good conversation.
Oh, it's like that.
I don't know about y'all, but Charlotte for me growing up was always like this big suburb, and it felt like we had this small town vibe at the same time as being a big city, at least down here in the Southeast. Your general well-being is all connected to your home, but it's also super important and relevant, at least, the conversation of education. Like where you live, unfortunately, does determine, and to an extent, where you can go to school, the type of education that you can receive. And unfortunately, here in North Carolina right now, our public schools, if you ask me at least, are under attack. Our legislature has been controlled by one political party for the better part of 13 years now, and they have systematically underfunded our public schools. Teachers have not really received a significant pay increase in years. They'll tell you, we increased their pay, and they do, by maybe 3% here, 3% there. But there's a saying that if a pay increase doesn't keep up with inflation, which over the past several years has been 7% or more, then it's actually a pay cut. Because if everything costs more around you, but your pay isn't keeping up with it, you're losing money. And unfortunately, that's the state of our public education system right now. Not just with teachers, but also with resources. So the types of equipment and learning material that students have access to in some places, especially here in East Charlotte. And wanted to kind of tap in with you, Jalen, as a public educator and see what your experience has been like in the classroom, kind of how it's been as a first-time teacher, knowing the role, and still on the younger side. Is this the type of career that you can see yourself growing into?
Yes and no. Only if they make the actual changes that they need to. So as you just said, they're not putting a lot of money into the schools nor the teachers. So just recently, we just had a meeting. They said they was gonna give us a 5% raise. That ain't really gonna do much if we already getting paid almost less than the average for everybody that's in North Carolina. So I don't feel like staying in there, but teaching kids is pretty fun. It gives me a sense of joy to actually see kids that don't really like doing stuff get excited to be in class. So that is a good side to it. But back to funding, we got to put in like requests on items. I still got a request since January for pencils. I still ain't getting my pencils yet. So if I can't even get pencils for students that need pencils, 12, 13 years old, gonna break a pencil for no reason, they can't do nothing in class. So most of them just sitting there, well, I don't got a pencil, I ain't gonna do nothing.
Has that been your general experience? Or not your general experience, but I hear from a lot of educators that kids, behavior-wise, just really, it's tough. Like it's a hard position to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Have you kind of felt that?
Yeah, and for me being so young, I don't remember being like that in school. Like, I literally just graduated a few years ago from high school, and then seeing them like this, like whole lot of breaking Chromebooks because they don't want to do work. Well, you went to Berry, right? And we had the Chromebooks there. We was like, we ain't about to mess up no whole laptop that's on school grounds like, we trying to graduate. They don't care. They, with a Chromebook from school. So if they don't want to do work, we can't even tell them that, like, you need to graduate or anything, or don't mess up no Chromebooks, because what's a Chromebook to them if they ain't gonna pay for it? So that's pretty much how it is.
It's interesting, and kind of curious about y'all's experience in public schools as well. Austin, where'd you go to high school at?
I went to Hopewell. I remember my dad saying like if we could afford to put you in private school, you would be there. I mean, I was able to get like a quality education there. So I mean, I wasn't really involved. Like I was kind of the kid that kept to himself. I went to school and went home. The school that I went to just didn't really offer anything that kind of fed into my interests. So it is what it is.
I don't know if y'all are super aware of what's going on in North Carolina. There's like a huge, I mean, in my opinion, transfer of wealth, really, to where the legislature has decided opportunity scholarships is going to be their next big push to really reinvigorate education. The Opportunity Scholarship Program was created years ago, well-intentioned at that, to really support low-income students and helping them get access to private schools, charter schools. They had restrictions on who could apply. You know, there was an income limit. Private schools or charter schools were subject to similar guidelines as public schools, because if you're receiving public money, you should be under the same scrutiny as public schools. But last year, the North Carolina legislature basically decided we're actually going to fund opportunity scholarships at $500 million. I think $500 million by the year 2026 or 7 will be poured into this program. They removed income eligibility. They removed a lot of the accountability guidelines that were in place to make sure public school or private schools, were operating effectively, actually educating kids. And just this past month, if I'm not mistaken, the scholarship program basically maxed out. Like, the amount of families that applied for a scholarship exceeded the amount of money that was actually available for them. Only problem is a lot of these families already send their kids to private schools. I'm really curious to get y'all's thoughts on the program in and of itself, and how does that sound to you? Like, do you think it makes sense to invest that much money into sending kids to private schools? And, important note, the amount of money that you get in the scholarships do not cover the entire cost of tuition. You might get $9,000 max for a private school that costs $20-something thousand a year. So it's not like we're sending kids to private school free of charge. They still got to pay out of pocket. And the entire justification is that our public schools aren't operating effectively. Jamal, I know you've got a young daughter at home. I mean, I'm curious to get your thoughts as a young father about what the dilemma of public schools versus private charter schools.
Yeah, she's in a charter school now. She just finished kindergarten, going to first grade, and she goes to Movement. And one thing that I appreciate about Movement is the amount of Black teachers that are there. You know, because I grew up in a white suburban area, and didn't really see a lot of Black teachers. And I don't know what the disconnect is between Black children in school. I've always had that question, and maybe you guys being educators can have some type of perspective on that. But I know that matters, like seeing, Black male teachers, Black female teachers, and because if we've been honest, white teachers just they're capable of having that empathy towards Black kids. Mm-hmm. When it comes to my daughter specifically, I probably want to stay in the charter school space, just because I feel like they are more intended with their learning. Their classrooms are called different HBCUs. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was, right there alone, I thought that was cool. And they also teach financial literacy. They have a banking system, and the kids can get toys if they do good in class and stuff like that. So I like to look at things like that, because growing up, I don't know if anybody else, but I didn't get that, Right. So,
as you acknowledge, they are able to provide some of that more specialized education, that attention that kids need. I have a movement school in the House district I'll be representing next year, and hear nothing but great things about the program. I just worry about if we get overly reliant on private schools, what does that do to the public education system? An overwhelming majority of kids in North Carolina, and I've venture to say across the country, attend public schools. And if we start putting too much of a spotlight on private schools, charter schools, do we just stop investing in public schools? Do we let educators go underpaid to the point where they have to leave the profession and find something else, or where they're working 3 jobs because I got to pay rent and feed myself and try to build a family at some point in time? I don't know. I personally get concerned about what that could do for the future of our public schools. I mean, all 10 of the elementary schools in my district are Title I schools, which already means that they're coming from pretty distressed situations at home. So it's like, these kids need help. As a former educator, kind of curious about how this conversation has been resonating with you.
When it comes to education, I have a lot of thoughts, especially when it comes to public education. By all means, definitely rooting for charter and public, but I'm gonna always advocate for public because what we're seeing, especially with our economy, like it's very hard for us to survive. So I always think of it in this perspective. We got our kids that's going to Title I school whose parents are just like, you know, you're gonna go to school because it's in our neighborhood. You get the, you know, free transportation. I don't have to worry about taking you to school. I need to get to work, right? So what about those students? Just because you're navigating this space in life, are they any less deserving of getting like good education? So, you know, us pushing this charter thing, and like, I feel a way about it because they deserve good educations just as much as, you know, those kids that's going to charter school. Because you are an active parent, you can take time out and, you know, sit down with your daughter and be like, okay, this is a school that you're gonna go to, this is why. You know, those parents that are struggling to get by day to day, they don't have time to sit down and be like, this is a good school, I'm gonna send you here because I want more for you. No, you're going to this school because it's, first off, I don't have to pay for anything, right? You get the transportation and you don't have to worry about anything, right? So when it comes to public education, man, I just think that money should be funded to the public, right? There are teachers with true passion in the public education system that would love to be there, but they're fighting their outside forces as well. They're worried about, I'm getting paid bare minimum, but I have to go home and I have to pay my rent, and I have to go and work a second job. So then they can't give the quality care that they want to the public or just that student that's in the public education system. When we talk about our economy, when we talk about politics, when we talk about anyone, teachers are building that foundation, not only just teaching, but they actually have to serve as counselors. They have to serve as sometimes like a parent. I had students that would like, you know, call me like dad. I'm like, you know, I have to explain, you have your father at home, but if ever you need me, like I'm here. Like teachers wear so many hats. So again, to say all of that is to say like, we should definitely be throwing more money into the public education because it's at the expense of not only just the teachers, but the children that are in the public education system. So like I said, I have a lot to say when it comes to that, but I won't talk your head off about it.
I want to get back to what you said about wearing the different hats. Like being a teacher is so much more than just teaching. Like just like how you said, they'll call you dad and all that other stuff. They have nothing going on outside of like school. So school is literally all they got. They go there. When they attach to you, they attach you to the hip. Like, I think I got 3 of them that just call me by my first name. Like they know me all their whole life. You want your kids to succeed. Many times I had to go not only fundraise, but like take my personal paycheck to buy items for my students because if I asked for support, it was like, we'll get to it, right? You know how many tickets you submit being a teacher. They never get to it. You're gonna go and spend your money so your kid can complete their work. But like I said, it becomes a lot. It becomes a lot.
It was my mom's decision for me to go to private school because she wanted better for me. She is a educator for CMS. My grandmother was an educator for CMS, so it was like she knew that it wasn't suitable enough for me. I think now a lot of educators are starting to look at it the way that you are, right? And it's like, I want CMS or I want public school to look different. I want it to be completely different than it ever has been before. So now we have a lot of educators that are back in the space and are doing everything that they can to kind of reinvigorate the school system. And I think that's really important.
We really haven't talked about some of the day-to-day policies that they're passing in Raleigh, but then how that affects school boards. And there are some extreme school boards across the state currently going so far as to banning books, going so far as to saying that kids can't perform certain acts and talent shows. I mean, really stepping on freedom of expression in a lot of different ways. And while we have an educator in the room, I wanted to kind of come back to you, Jalen, just to ask, how has some of the more culture war stuff that has come from Raleigh began to affect, or has it begun to affect your job and what you're able to cover in the classroom and maybe the conversations that you're able to have with your students?
Yeah, so it's hard to talk about reproductive systems or just the body in general in class because abortion You have to go through sex, gender, all that different type of stuff. So in social studies, it's hard to really have a conversation about slavery when they make the curriculum like 2 days. But then you can talk about Christopher Columbus for like 2 weeks.
Are they understanding? Like when you let them know that that's a conversation that you may not, you can't have, are they understanding that?
I try to the best that I can, because even if I try to explain why, it's still me going into it. So then that's only gonna raise more questions of why can't I talk about this? Then we going into politics and I ain't even
you got to protect yourself
in that area. Yeah, I ain't even gonna set myself up like that.
Instances like that, when you can't have conversations with kids, how do they support you with that?
Yeah, they haven't supported me at all. I literally had like 30 minutes to talk about the reproductive system. And they was like, bro, move on to it, get to the next thing so you don't stay on it for too long. There's no other like reinforcement on like trying to help get through it or answer certain questions or even just have a good way to tell them that like we can't talk about this other than just briefly touch on it and then keep it moving.
It seems like it's very cookie cutter, like this is the way that you're supposed to do it. Don't do anything else. If you don't stray outside of you don't color outside the lines, then you won't have any problems. Which, I mean, that's not the way kids work.
If we only feeding them the same thing, like they ain't gonna learn nothing. That's the same reason why public education is where it is now, because we don't have the free range of actually educating them in things that's not usually being talked about in their life or even outside of school. So,
do you feel like an educator? And I ask that is only because education is like children are like exploring, right? And asking questions, like they're supposed to be inquisitive. So I ask you that because it's like if they're, mandated everything as far as curriculum and what you can and can't do in the classroom, how do you feel as an educator? Do you feel like more like a liaison than more of a educator?
Yeah, I feel like I'm a substitute, just giving out work. Like, literally had to talk to the people that was making the lesson plans and was like, I can't do this. They literally looking at screens and pieces of paper telling them all the information instead of me telling them the information itself, because it's easier to hear somebody say it and talk about all the different questions that they have rather than being on the computer and just writing down verbatim what they see. So
right now, I'm telling you right now, it's a crazy statement, but yeah,
the fact that many of us had, or we learned about sexual health in middle school at some point. But now, because of all these changes in our state legislature, these laws, like the Parents' Bill of Rights law, like that's the actual law that got passed recently, where parents have more rights and authority over their child's education than their teachers, than their school system. Parents can say, I don't want my child learning about gender, I don't want my child learning about sex. So it's very interesting to see just in our lifetimes, we're in our 20s and 30s, that things have changed so quickly.
You can't get through a lesson without hearing those questions, because when I hear that, it's almost like, oh, we're absolutely doing a disservice to our kids, because it's not like if you watch the news or if you're super involved in the political space. I mean, over the past several years, educators have been vilified. And I mean, I don't know if you felt that specifically here in Charlotte, but I think we have a bit more of an accepting community here. But in different places across the state, public school teachers are looked at as I think Mark Robinson calls them indoctrination camps as far as public schools, because he thinks, and all of the folk who think like him or think similarly to him believe that that kids are learning in school that they should be transitioning, or that they're learning how to transition, or that they're being told to be a part of the LGBTQ plus community, instead of, as you mentioned, it's them becoming who they are. It's them finding out more about themselves and learning when they have these questions and they're with somebody that they trust and they can't get any information. It makes me think about what does that lack of information or access to information do to you in the long term? Because I can only imagine that it probably, your mental health suffers, especially if maybe at home isn't a safe space for you, and you think that your educator, somebody you're close with and in proximity with every day, can't even really talk about it. So it's definitely, I hate that. I don't know what else to put.
Hearing a teacher say, can't talk about it right now, it's like it makes them shut down, even though it's not your full intention on shutting them down on a situation that they want to talk about. It still hurts them in the long run to where they shut off from school entirely. So it's like, if I don't want to talk to you about all the different things that's going on in your life or things that's connected to it, why should I give a damn about physics or chemistry, photosynthesis. It don't matter. So
Thinking about Jalen's experience in the classroom, and granted, I know that your daughter goes to movement, so it's a charter school. Is reproductive health an area that you want for your child to learn about while she's in school? Is that something that you feel like, as a parent, maybe you're the best person to educate her on that, or in the classroom?
I don't mind it. I mean, I think that, hearing it from a teacher who's educated in that space would be good. And of course, she'll get, her talks amongst, myself and her mom. So, I don't mind. I think it's great. I think that they should let them have more free-flowing conversations like he's advocating for, because it's just not fair to them. It's just not fair that they get to have these questions, burning inside them. As we all see kids ask so many questions a day, and they don't get answered. And that could lead to so many different things, and some more questions, and possibly emotions start to get involved. So, yeah, I do advocate for teachers to be able to talk to kids about it. So
1 in 5 women either get an abortion or consider an abortion, which means everybody in this room knows a woman, or likely knows a woman, that has either thought about it or has gone through with an abortion procedure. And it doesn't really matter the reason, because it's their body and they get to choose what's best for them. But curious, as men who don't particularly have to worry about abortions, it's not like we're getting abortion care, what are you all's thoughts on people like Mark Robinson, men who have no role or responsibility in have no role in giving birth to a baby or carrying a baby? What does that make you feel like, knowing that you have women in your life that would absolutely be affected by a decision like that by a man who has absolutely nothing to do with it?
My initial thought is, what do they gain from this? What is the effect of it? Because, like you said, we hear about this with people in our life that thought or went through abortion. We thought nothing of it. It's their bodies. They have the option to do what it is that they want to do with their bodies. So as far as a man making these changes, what's the agenda behind it? What is it that comes? Where do they? And it's bad that we have to look at it like this, but I mean, it's the reality. And how do they benefit from this? What is it that they're going to gain from this that we don't know or see or hear about when they make this change?
Nothing. Just power. It's just if you ask me, a power move. It's also probably based heavily, not even probably, based heavily in religion. A lot of folks in political office are religious people. I mean, I'm a spiritual person. I think a lot of folks in here are as well. But when you're in public office, you kind of got to remove that from the way you make decisions that are going to affect everybody's life. At least you can't justify everything based off of your personal religion, because somebody may not be religious at all and have a very different viewpoint, yet you're imposing your will on me. And so I honestly don't see what they gain at all, other than a furthering of their own agenda and using the power that they have to just do, and really to do harm, because
it's like a pointless move. That's what it feels like. It doesn't make any sense. There's a lot more things that can be focused on opposed to something like this.
It's always been super interesting to me that the majority of the time that I hear about abortion, and you hear about abortion laws or rules, it's usually coming from a man. And I always think, I mean, like you said, right, it's clearly a power move. And I always think about, like, if there was something that only men did, that women had could go up and basically say, men shouldn't be allowed to do this. I always think about the way that probably most white men would respond to that would be barbaric, probably. So it's like, it's always been super interesting to me that most of the time men go out of their way, specifically on abortion, they go out of their way to get up and stand up and say, hey, this is wrong. Women shouldn't be allowed to do it, when it's like, if the tables were turned, you probably wouldn't, it wouldn't even be a conversation. They wouldn't even be allowed the space to say what a man could and could not do. So that's always just been super interesting to me, how men always find a way to put themselves into something that they honestly have no control over, and never really should have had any control over. Like everybody has already stated, it's their body. They should be able to do what they want to do with it, and end of discussion, right? It shouldn't be a 2-hour conversation. It shouldn't have to be a bill. It shouldn't have to be any of that, because it's literally your person. You should be allowed to do with it whatever you want. That's just how I've always felt about it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it is right that a guy feel like he can make that type of decision for women, right? Especially not knowing their situations. But on top of that, as a politician, I just don't think he is suitable. Because if that is how he's thinking now, how is he going to think in the future, right? And not only that, but he's not thinking longevity.
I'm sitting here thinking about, Jalen, you sharing how they're limiting what you can teach about reproductive health in school, and then out in the community, they're limiting our access to reproductive health by way of restricting abortions. So, you're putting young people in a predicament where they're not learning about, proper and, being educated on reproductive health in school, then also limiting abortions to right now we have a 12-week abortion ban in North Carolina. Possibly, if Mark Robinson and this crazy state legislature get elected, a complete absolute ban on abortions. And it puts us, I don't know, to me it bogs the question or brings up the question of, does everybody really realize what's at stake? I think we're starting to see these crazy ads now of all the crazy things Mark Robinson is saying about abortion access. But are we having that conversation out in the community? Are our families and stuff realizing that, if we keep going this direction as a state in North Carolina, folks won't have access to abortions at all. Folks won't have access to reproductive health. We all, I think, understand it, or do we all understand it, and do the people in our families, our friends and circles understand that?
How many of y'all knew that there's a 72-hour waiting period between the first time you go to an abortion provider and when you can actually receive an abortion? Most people don't know that. Most people don't know you have to receive a phone call from the abortion provider in between that 72-hour waiting period. That is essentially them, and they have to do this by law, but they're trying to scare you out of it. Legally, they have to try to scare you out of getting the abortion, and it's extremely restrictive, as I already said, and a lot of people don't know. So 12 weeks, a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant at 12 weeks. And it's just or at the very least, they just are finding out. And so how do we expect children to be coming out of school with limited knowledge about reproductive health unless they're getting it elsewhere, unless they're getting it from their parents, which hopefully they are if they're not getting it in school. But if they don't know about the way their bodies work as they're continuing to grow into them and they're making mistakes, maybe they are having sex, they get pregnant, and now you don't even know you're pregnant until you're at the limit of being able to receive an abortion. Or God forbid, Mark Robinson becomes governor. Now you don't have a choice but to carry this baby to term, and you're a baby yourself.
North Carolina already has an extreme abortion, or very restrictive abortion law that we passed just last year. So they're getting to this point already to see what they can get away with.
Mark Robinson, he's running for governor of our state right now. Black guy. If elected, he'll be the first black governor of our state. And that is one of the things, well, first of all, to say that in 2024 sounds insane. But the guy is insane. The guy is insane. I mean, and he is a Republican. It's I'm trying to, you can be black and be a Republican. I don't think anybody should just discount anybody's lived experience and why they may choose a particular political party over another simply because of the color of their skin. But the guy has gone so far as to say, Black people, need to pay reparations. He has called people like Martin Luther King radicals, maybe a terrorist, if I'm not mistaken, has kind of stepped on Martin Luther King's legacy. Donald Trump has called Mark Robinson, a better version of Martin Luther King. And it's just this guy has done absolutely nothing for nobody. He's our lieutenant governor right now. And the guy barely shows up for work. I used to work at the state legislature, and I can tell you, ain't the brightest bulb in the light fixture. I'm serious. The guy was nuts, but has become the standard bearer for the party in North Carolina, and really nationally, he's getting a lot of recognition for it. Y'all, and not even if, y'all will start to see more ads on your TVs, YouTubes, TikToks. You'll see them.
I saw one this week watching the news, and it was absolutely insane. He was talking about abortion, and he said the reason that most women need abortions is because they can't keep their skirt down. And I was like,
I heard that.
I was like, wow.
Nah, that's gotta be
Yeah.
a skit. I'm watching
Yeah.
this.
That was crazy.
It's apparent to me that he is pandering to white people.
Yeah.
For sure.
And we see a pattern with black people who are Republicans. Go down that line and say all these wild things and even believe them. And what I've realized is that there's no retirement plan being a coon. Once they're done with you, they're going to sue you. And then where most black people seem to, that partake in that type of behavior, what they seem to get misconstrued is you shun away the black community, and then for the white community,
And then once they're done with you try to come
wanna
back
come
to
back.
us. And it's like, no,
What's her name?
you made your decision. You said what you said.
What's her name? Candace Owens. She
And
just did
it's
that.
all
Yeah.
right. It's a lot of, what's his name? Not Carl Thomas. That's a sister. Dude. Clarence Thomas. There you go. Yeah. So
Did he say
it's wild.
that he said black people should pay reparations? Like come out of our pocket and pay reparations?
You gotta ask him, to be honest with you. He basically was shutting down the argument that black people are owed reparations and was saying that, in fact, we should be paying reparations for the fact that we get to live in the United States of America. And it's just like, to say that is so ignorant of the history of black Americans, and honestly distorts the reality of black Americans across the country in many different ways. And it's like, okay, because you yourself have this perceived great experience living here and have been able to go from shouting things at a city council meeting to being the lieutenant governor of our state, you think that all black people have the same experience? Or what? It's a super, I keep saying it, the guy's insane. I don't really know how else to put it, man. Those are the kinds of people that are running for statewide offices right now in North Carolina. And it's like, if we're not paying attention and if we're not having conversations like this, you wouldn't know that. Or at least, I don't want to generalize that y'all wouldn't know that, because I think y'all would know that eventually. But like, there's nutcases out there that are running for these seats, and it does pose an absolute threat to like the future of our state.
But what does that say about our country? Like, because we have people like that running, and on top of, you talk about a seat as far as like the president, we have a guy like Donald Trump that, just received 34 counts, but he can still run for president. Like, what I'm learning is ignorance sells. And regardless of the fact, like you said, they're doing it because they want to, not only up their lifestyle, but they want to reach these higher positions as well. And look, he said something about these reparations, how we need to have conversations. Like, conversations need to be had about everything.
To get deep into politics, you kind of got to like dig in yourself and do your research. But what's handed to you and like what you see is just a presidential election. That's the bigger scope of it. I see the president as a point of contact for the U.S. Someone foreign country calls, they want to talk to your supervisor, that's who gets on the phone, you know what I'm saying? So for changes that we are going to feel, I don't feel like we're going to get that from the president. So when it comes to local voting, how do we get more insight on that? How do we get more information or like more understanding for who's voting, what they're trying to do, what changes they're trying to make? Because that's who I feel like you were saying, the big guys aren't the ones that make the changes, the little people on the ground. So the people that are local, how do we get more into what they have going on so that we can put these people into positions of power to get changes that we actually want to feel?
You're 110% correct. Like, local politics affects your life much more directly than anything the federal government will do. From where you can live to what kind of house you can live in, to the way the road is maintained or the sidewalks, power lines, like turning your water faucet on and off, that is your local government that manages a lot of the day-to-day functions. They literally keep the lights on and the water running. And so as far as how to get involved, so like if there's a thing you care about, I always say there is a group out there that is advocating for it. If you're a biker, there's an urbanist group that literally gets together, I think once a month, they do critical mass, they bike across the city because they want to show people you can get around with more than just a car. There are groups that do conservancy. If you care about green space, you can go and literally clean up green ways and blue ways across the city every week if you wanted to. And they even go to city council to advocate for funding to improve county commission to improve funding for our county parks and recreation centers. And most of them have trails or greenways around them. So, but we have a city councilman in the room, so I'm really curious to get your thoughts as somebody who's making these decisions on a regular basis. How can folks from your community, and then as it relates to Charlotte, engage with our local officials?
Local government in general is intentionally designed in a way so that we're not paying attention, so that it's not accessible to the people. Find those advocates, those allies, those activists who are involved, who are paying attention. So even if you can't go to a meeting and sit, all day, hours at a time listening to what's going on, you can read their blog posts about it or follow their social media. You can send money, you can send support to the groups who are doing that. But what I will also say is that a lot of what we're seeing happening at the state level, the federal level, they're trying it first at the local level. They're putting so much extra funding into policing, but no money into local public schools, local county public school systems. They're cutting funding from social service programs and mental health. Those are things that are decided at the county level. So they try all these crazy radical acts locally first, and they get away with it because nobody's paying attention. And then it moves up to the state level, it moves up to the federal level. This year, they're considering an anti-masking law where even people with medical conditions couldn't even wear masks. So they're trying these acts now to see, what they can get away with, so that when Mark Robinson gets elected governor, or potentially Donald Trump gets reelected president, they can get away with stuff because we've allowed them to. So it's definitely important to start paying attention locally.
We talked about Donald Trump earlier. I think we all know he's a criminal. He does not deserve to be in the White House, but is on a track to be. I mean, he's their guy.
Based off of what I've been hearing, I talk to Jordan all the time. I'm not super well versed in politics, but I do know what's right and what's wrong. So that's the easiest way to kind of go about voting, at least at the upper tier level. But I would say, from what I hear, especially from elders, right, like from my grandparents and older aunts and uncles, they kind of look at it the same way too. Like, as long as it's not Trump, it doesn't matter, right? And when I was younger, I understood that mentality, and I still do now, but I do think you should know what you're voting for, right? So yeah, it may be the lesser of two evils, but if it is the lesser evil, let's know what we're voting for, and
Showing them we're not going to vote for you blindly, you know what I'm saying? And understanding that it's going to come with something. Our vote is going to come with something. So I'm just curious to see how it's going to go. I don't really talk to a lot of people about politics, so I don't know where their head is at, but like I said, only time will tell. So
The note about knowledge and having access to information, it made me think about somebody, and I'm gonna get to it in a second. How many of y'all have heard of Jeff Jackson? Never heard the name? You heard the name? Well, Jeff Jackson is a current congressman. He represents a part of Charlotte. He's one of, 4 Democrats that we have in North Carolina that represents us on a congressional level. He's also running for Attorney General of our state. He's a lawyer by trade. He served in the state Senate for a few years, and now, again, he's in Congress. He's running against a guy named Dan Bishop. And Dan Bishop is also running for AG. He's the Republican nominee for the position. Dan Bishop is an insurrectionist. He is one of the folks who has supported Trump from the beginning, supported the January 6th attempted coup at the Capitol, and is now running to be our state's top law enforcement officer, if you will. I brought up Jeff Jackson because he's the TikTok Congress member. If you've ever seen the guy that sits in front of his camera, usually is in a kitchen, real relatable, like a polo, maybe even a t-shirt sometimes, and he's just real calm, cool, collected. I'm telling you about what I did today in Congress. That kind of, I think, content creation from elected officials is so underrated. I mean, I don't think people realize how much I don't think elected officials, realize how much people yearn to just learn and know more about what's going on, but don't want to be lectured to in a way that I don't understand. Like, you just spit at me Robert's Rules of Order and the procedure for how the House gets business done. I didn't receive that. I don't follow that. But if you just kind of put it in lay terms as to what you're doing, it makes information so much more accessible. And yeah, no, I just wanted to bring that up because, acknowledging how important it is to just have knowledge, information in the first place, will dramatically alter the way you vote. In some cases, it will make you vote if you weren't before. I was speaking to somebody the other day, literally, what's today, Sunday? Yesterday. I went to a walk, and young kid basically was saying that he was 21. I'm 26, so he's 5 years younger than me. But he's saying he never voted. Like, in the 3 years that he's been able to vote, he has not voted yet because he just did not see any utility in doing so. So me being a candidate myself, trying to walk him through why it's important to vote and why it's not the only tool that you have. I get exactly why you don't think it's the be-all, end-all, because it's not. But dude, there was an election in rural, I can't remember the exact place, that was decided by a coin toss because it was a tie. So it's like your vote, if you lived there, would have made the difference in that election. So it's like you can never just say it doesn't matter, but not knowing why it's important in the first place presents a big, I think, barrier for some people.
You pay car insurance for your car. Something may not happen to your car, but you pay car insurance to make sure that that if something bad does happen, that it's taken care of. Kind of relates back to the same way. Like, even if your vote doesn't count at all, you're gonna do nothing about it at all. So why not just exercise your right for it? Just to at least do your part, and trying to ensure that things move forward accordingly. So like doing that is better than doing nothing at all. Even if you don't believe your vote counts, doing that is still better than just saying, my vote doesn't matter and just sitting back and then still complaining, because that's one thing that's a pet peeve of mine. It's like it's a lot of complaints, but it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say too, just to piggyback off of that, when I was growing up, I used to hear my grandparents, and my mom does it now too, specifically to my younger brother. She makes sure that we vote, not necessarily because, like the whole my vote doesn't matter thing, but think about all of the stuff that our people had to go through to be able to vote. So you may think that it doesn't matter, but you're gonna pay your respects to those who came before you and did everything that they needed to do so that you had the opportunity to vote. I don't care if you go in there and write your name on the ballot, you're gonna go vote because somebody may have lost their life, they may have, physically harmed or whatever it may be. Somebody had to go through, a sufficient amount of stuff for you to be able to exercise this right. So you need to do it, right? It's that if nothing else, you're paying respects to those who paved the way for you. And I think that's a piece of it that we often forget about. And not to go too far into it, but I really wish entertainers, specifically rappers and R&B singers and NBA players, NFL players, I really wish they would use their voices a little bit more. I think when Trump came out, that was kind of when we saw a lot of artists kind of come out and say no for Trump, but I wish it had been go vote. I mean, no for Trump is cool. Like I'm not mad at that either, but tell us to go vote too, right? Like don't just say don't vote for Trump, because saying don't vote for Trump, for somebody that can mean I just ain't gonna vote at all. You know what I'm saying? Tell us to go vote. When your album drops, you want us to promote that, you want us to go get that, you want us to watch the NBA Finals tonight, right? Tell us to go vote. You know what I'm saying? It takes 2 seconds. You don't have to tell us who to go vote for, but you got a band of people, you got a camp of people that listen to you. You know what I'm saying? It's people that check their phone and we know how it is with Beyonce. As soon as she drop a song, it's over with, right? Imagine what the difference could be if Beyonce would just tell people to go vote. I mean, I'm not saying that it's all on Beyonce, but I just say that to say I just wish celebrities would kind of use their platform a little bit more to kind of push black people to go vote a little bit more.
I gotta push back just a little bit because you see people like 50 Cent, who was just on Capitol Hill the other day. He's been convicted of 34 felonies. It's like, so are all black people now just felons? Like, I don't particularly care for when celebrities use their platforms and make kind of uneducated statements or otherwise just don't use it to the benefit. It's like if you don't feel like you're equipped to say something about a particular issue and you have a massive platform, just say that. Or just don't say anything. So.
And we, at the end of the day, we know they're pawns, right? The entertainers, the athletes, they're all pawns, and they don't have a backbone. They don't have no racial dignity. Of course, you take a young black kid who didn't really have anything, and now they had a viral moment, now they get signed, or now they're, in the leagues. That's all that's gonna matter. It's like, I got these millions of dollars, so I need to do what I need to do to keep these millions of dollars.
Right.
And so they're not gonna speak out on issues like Colin Kaepernick would. Like, he was the only one. I mean, he was one of them. He was very few. It was only a handful of them, right? But as far as to the extent that he has gone, he's been the only one that has done that in recent time. And so, and it just goes to show you how divisive we are as a group, right? And these people have the resources to really change a lot of stuff in our lives, right? And they're just not going to. So I completely bypass looking to them for help. I think it's going to come to us on a grassroots level. Come together, arm in arm, and really, like I said, put our foot on their necks, about certain stuff.
So Jordan mentioned earlier Jeff Jackson, who's running for AG. That's one of our statewide races. We also have 4 black people running statewide in North Carolina this year. One of them is Braxton Winston, who's a city council member here in Charlotte. He's running for Commissioner of Labor. We also have Jessica Holmes, who's currently our state auditor. She's the first black woman to ever hold a statewide position in North Carolina, on our council of state. So we have these very important statewide races in North Carolina. We're talking about how critically important this presidential election is going to be. What do you all think it's going to take to get black men out to vote this year?
Tangibles.
Reparations.
I feel like our community we do really well with tangibles. So like if you can tangibly show them, hey, if you don't, here's what's at stake here. I feel like that is a way better approach to take than just, kind of telling people, hey, you need to get out and go vote. I feel like that would be a really good approach, to really get black people out in droves, black men out in droves to really get the job done.
If it's a presidential election, this is a cycle, this comes around every 4 years. It's time to vote, but it's like, it's the same thing happening. So knowing like the specifics and the differences of this election versus maybe a previous one, that can help with getting people out there to actually go vote because they know what it is. Like we're pushing towards a goal of something versus actually an agenda opposed to just putting someone in office. And also, I think education to giving people understanding of that their vote matters and why it matters. Like I personally lack the understanding of my vote in relation to electoral college or whatever. Like you hear about that growing up, you hear that like they're the ones that actually make the vote, so it makes people feel like their vote doesn't matter. Even though that may not be the case, I'm still not fully like knowledgeable of it, but they just don't you may not feel like you're making an impact, and when you don't feel like you're making an impact or bringing value, you don't make the attempt to. So I think that is the education. For knowledge of what they're voting for, and then also like the value that their vote brings. I think those are two factors that would help.
Appreciate y'all bringing up all the different things that would make you more inclined to vote and would really capture your audience or your attention, excuse me. And also just appreciate y'all for really coming out and being a part of the conversation. This is going to be one of a few that we do across the state, really to learn more about where young black men in particular are. What do you care about? What are the issues that matter to you? It was said earlier, we're not all the same. We all look at things differently. We all have different feelings about situations. We perceive situations differently. And it's important to just sit down every once in a while and just have a conversation, do a little post check with your boys, even strangers in some cases, because I don't think everybody in this room knew each other before you walked in. So it's just like, thank you.